Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Alexa. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm on the events team here at Books Are Magic, and we are so excited to be hosting what is perhaps the sweetest event we've ever had, a double header mother-son book launch for Jyoti Mukharji and Auyon Mukherjee's Heartland Masala and Sandra Boynton and Devin McEwan's Extremely Happy Holidays, moderated by none other than Helen Rossner. Before we get before we get started, I just want to get a few housekeeping notes out of the way. We'll be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so you can start thinking of some questions during the conversation and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, all the authors will be signing and personalizing books after the discussion, and I'll be telling you all how to line up for that. And if you're joining us on the YouTube live stream, please explore the link in the description box below and buy copies of Heartland Masala and Extremely Happy Holidays. All right, I'm going to get through these bios and these descriptions as fast as I can so we can get to the good part. Heartland Masala pairs 99 recipes from Indian cooking instructor Jyoti Mukherjee and cultural historical essays by her son, Auyon Mukherjee. A celebration of Indian cuisine and the American immigrant experience, this beautiful cookbook is utterly original. Extremely Happy Holidays. This exuberant little book takes you through cocktails perfect for New Year's Day all the way to New Year's Eve, with stops at each holiday in between. McEwan's original creations are truly wonderful, and the book is designed and illustrated by the inimitable Sandra Boynton. Jyoti Mukherjee is a chef, teacher, and retired physician. She immigrated to the U.S. from India in the late 70s and began teaching weekly Indian cooking classes out of her home in Prairie Village, Kansas in 2010. Auyon Mukherjee is a writer, musician, and culinary historian who spends most of his time thinking about food. Since 2009, he has toured with and cooked for the acclaimed indie folk band Darlingside. He otherwise finds time to work in and around kitchens in both Kansas City and Massachusetts. Devin McEwan is an avid amateur mixologist who was recently told by a drinking buddy, "You should write a book, and I'll do the illustrations." While such drunken ramblings are usually best ignored, in this case, the drinking buddy in question was Sandra Boynton, internationally celebrated cartoonist and incidentally McEwan's mother. How could he say no? Sandra Boynton is Devin McEwan's mother. When she is not busy taste testing cocktails, she writes and illustrates books and writes and produces music. She has worked with greats like B.B. King, Yo-Yo Ma, Stanley Tucci, and Meryl Streep. But Devin is her favorite collaborator because not one of those other people even offered to make her a cocktail. And Helen Rossner is a writer at The New Yorker. Without further ado, enjoy
It's going to be incredibly fun. I'm so excited to be here. A fun little personal fact about me before jumping in. I'm a food writer mostly and The New Yorker's restaurant critic, but a long time ago, my very first ever job in New York City was as the assistant to Sandy's editor. And I was so starstruck. Like, my first job in New York, and I landed in a job where I got to meet Sandra Boynton. It was so cool.
Did she scream at you?
I do remember having to book you your hotel rooms at the St. Regis, which was very glamorous, and I was like, this is the coolest job I've ever had. And also, there were amazing book parties. So this feels very full circle for me. I'm just delighted to be here. And the Heartland Masala is just one of the most wonderful books that I have read this year. I'm so excited for all of you who haven't read it. There are a lot of cookbooks that come out every year, and I try to read as many of them as I can, and it is just the voice and the energy and the joy in that book is so wonderful. So congratulations to all four of you for being here and having written these books together, which is crazy. If I wrote a book with my mom, I'd kill myself. So just delightful. I guess we should start at sort of the obvious place. I'm going to ask some questions that are for everybody and some questions that are specific to each book. But for both of our pairs of mother-son duos, where did these ideas begin? Where did the collaboration begin? Where did the idea of like, hey, we should do this together begin for you?
Sure. So I had been teaching, and 3-4 years into my teaching, my students asked me to write a book. And like I always say, I love to teach, I love to talk, but I don't like to write. And so even before, when during those 3-4 years, when the food editors would ask me to submit an article, I would ask Auyon to write for me because he does write very well, without a doubt. And so that was the obvious thing, when my students said, please write a book, I asked Auyon if he would help me, and he did say yes at that time.
I did say yes, but I wasn't serious about my
Like, sure, Mom.
Yeah, my mother is a very powerful woman, and so no to her. So and at the time I was touring like 120 dates a year, so the idea of writing a book with my mom in between was totally nonsensical. So I said yes, but first you have to send me your recipes, and I knew that was a very high bar. But it took her like a year and a half to send them over, but then she did, and by that point it was too late to turn around.
And did you know what the nature of your collaboration was going to be? Like how the lines would break down, who would
No.
be responsible for what?
No, it took.
My concept of the book was just get all my recipes together, spiral bind them, or maybe staple them, put some pictures in there because my students said you must have a picture to every recipe. And that was my vision. Auyon took it to another level.
Which wasn't like a peaceful process. Not that she was fine with the vision, it was just the time it took. Her vision was like, get this thing done in a year. And it took us 8 years to make our book. And some of that was me like realizing that I didn't just want to write another Indian cookbook, so like have like, the history and cultural context part of it was important. That was something I knew I wanted to study, but I didn't have any experience in that, so I started just undertaking a self-study during which my mother started threatening her own death. Just like I could die before this comes out, which is true of any collaboration, really. Yeah, but in this case, it didn't speed us up, but it was very stressful.
And then, Devin, for you and for Sandy, from what I understand from your bio, you were the instigator of the idea, Sandra. Unless the story is embellished a little bit.
Our book has a really long history for such a short
We
book.
have like 3 hours.
Okay, we're gonna ramble for a little while then. So flashback to Christmas Eve 2006. We're in Park City, Utah, and I'm trying to make the Joy of Cooking's eggnog recipe. But Utah has really strict blue laws, and Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday, so I can't get the requisite rum or brandy or bourbon to make the recipe. But what we do have is margarita mixings, because my mom's a margarita aficionado. So I cobbled together what I dubbed the Nagarita, which is Cointreau and tequila and eggnog, and then it has a nutmeg rim and a margarita glass. It's a little, I don't know. It seemed logical to me, but I was maybe not sober at the time. And so she was like, "Oh, this should be a book. We should do the Nagarita book." And I was like, that's a pretty thin concept. I don't know how one recipe. And so eventually it kind of morphed into we should do a book of holiday themed cocktails. And even then, that idea probably was born, I don't know, a decade ago. And then finally, at the beginning of last year, my mom comes to me and she's like, "All right, this is the cover of our book," and she has it completely designed. And she's like, "I spoke to my publisher and we have a contract, so you have to write this book." And so it was sort of like a reverse intervention where my mom comes to me and she's like, "You need to day drink professionally." So that was. Then it took about a year of work to
Do you agree with that telling of the narrative?
It's actually true. And interestingly enough, the cover front cover did not change other than we added mocktails to it. So the cover is as it was, partly because I wanted to convince him this is real. All it needs is all the pages.
Which is the same way she does her own book. She comes up with the title on the cover first, which is a very unorthodox methodology.
It's true, because I like to fool myself that it actually exists, and so I've always done that. I always start with the title on the cover and just go, yeah.
I should try that for my writer's block. I always write my columns backwards. I start with the ending, and I take forever and want to die, and maybe I should start with the title. That's a hot tip.
Yeah,
That's a good one. Yeah. So then, once you presented him with the cover, how did the insides come about? Did you go drinks first, then pictures?
We have
Pictures
no
were like it
idea.
just
Yeah.
you just woke up one day.
No idea. The insides, it was some sort of back and forth. Like, it wasn't just that I wrote the manuscript and then my mom did the art. I would kind of give her concepts and she'd give me sort of art for inspiration. So it still wasn't kind of a linear progression. And then I think because her art is so vivid, I really wanted the cocktails to be high concept. I didn't, some holiday cocktail books, they're like, "Oh, this is just whatever drink I slap together and I'm calling it a Christmas cocktail." I wanted them to be really kind of fully realized. So my 3 rules for every drink in the book was they have to be good, number 1. They have to be high concept. It has to like really relate to the holiday in question, and then also that it has to be something accessible to the home bartender. So the book does call for some somewhat more advanced cocktail techniques, but still not like a centrifuge or like liquid nitrogen.
Well, you do some really interesting things like saline solution, which I feel like, was a tip that I think is totally going to transform my cocktail game. This idea of just adding a little bit of salt just opens everything up.
I just stole that wholesale from Dave Arnold, who wrote this book called Liquid Intelligence. So that I just is pure theft. I can't take no credit for it.
All art is theft. I think that's completely appropriate. One other thing that both of your books I'm really fascinated by, and I want to hear from, I think, all 4 of you, but let's start maybe with the sons, is voice. You, Devin, just like, I feel like you embody what I think of as Boynton voice, and maybe I should start thinking of it as McEwan voice. So effortlessly. Like, is that just innate? Like, is it genetic? Like, how did you capture that so flawlessly?
Yeah.
And also so grown-up-ly.
Wow, nothing about me is grown up. Thank you. Yeah, I think it really was just kind of innate. I think I grew up around my mom's stuff. I think my sense of humor is very much informed by hers, and also we have kind of like touchstones in common. So like my whole family would read Dave Barry growing up. P.G. Wodehouse is kind of a more recent obsession of the Boynton McEwan
I'm
thing.
obsessed with Wodehouse
Yeah,
right now.
he's
Like obsessed. We should,
incredible.
okay, well, we're gonna put a pin in that.
So yeah, I think I didn't really try and adapt my voice. And maybe there are a few jokes in the book that are like maybe slightly edgier than my mom tends to do, but like ever so slightly, like no.
It's a slightly older audience. For
Yeah,
this
so
book too.
I try to avoid doing anything that would like completely torpedo her reputation, but I still wanted it to be somewhat, like maybe just a shade more irreverent. I mean, she's pretty irreverent. I don't know, like a shade different than what
How
she
did the
normally
voice
does.
feel to you to read something that is so harmonious with the way
It's
that you write
very
as
much
well?
the way Devin is. He's the funniest person that I know.
You need to get out more.
No, this is far enough. I think I might have made one suggestion, and it's interesting when we sent it for editorial, and I actually said to Running Press, there aren't going to be any grammatical errors in this. Devin has never made one in his whole life. It's true. I don't know. It was interesting because I had to. I had to taste test all of these cocktails. I know you got to be conscientious. But it was really cool to see how he approached them and how he evolved it. And what's interesting is since I'm known as a children's book author, I wasn't always. I was originally known for greeting cards. So I basically think of myself as a cartoonist. And I don't really change my sense of audience in general. I'm not expecting little kids to be drinking out of this, but I don't.
There's the Virgin Island cocktail.
Absolutely,
There's some mocktail.
absolutely. People make this huge distinction. This is appropriate for a 1-year-old, this is 5, and this is 8, and you just go, language is language, and I think people are siloing it way too much. And way back when we first knew each other, I did that the chocolate book, right?
Yeah, that was right before my time, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was, very much a humor book, cartoon stuff, but for adults. It wasn't, and very researched, over-researched, because it was chocolate. Just like Devin over-researched for this book, I over-researched that one. Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me that the voice is the voice, and the jokes are the jokes, and the attention to rhythm and the attention to pacing. If you're going for something good, it's going to be good. It makes a lot of sense to me. Auyon, when you wrote you did extensive research for these essays and headnotes and sections in the book. How did you find the voice for that? I think you move so elegantly between scholarly and personal and these like moments of really incredible brightness and joy, and then also some things that are really heavy. And I'm curious what that process was like for you.
So thank you for all of the extremely nice things that you said, not only in the intro, but also just now. Deeply appreciated. I think So I've been writing as Jyoti Mukharji for over a decade now. So anytime she's published an article in Kansas City, I got to write it. And so thinking about, and I think, but also had a pretty firm sense. So when conceptualizing what we were doing with the book and realizing that like writing yet another Indian, like I think early on it became clear to me that writing yet another Indian cookbook from an upper middle class Indian American kitchen was not of interest, and that it's a genre that is lovely and there are many books that exist in it already and we didn't need to add to it. Like deciding on the history and context being a part of it, a huge part of that was like, but I want it to be accessible enough that someone is excited to pick it up and read it. And I think there are a lot of ways to like introduce that lightness. One of those was the illustration that we had as well, which like a huge touchstone there was Samin Nosrat's Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, where a very text-heavy book, but is so pleasing to read and pick up just because of Wendy McMountain's illustrations. And then the tone also, just like one that is you're sort of talking and hanging with, like I think of reading someone is like hanging out with them, and to be someone who's like explaining things, but trying to toe the line, not like with the history especially. I think like the condescending thing can come, or like or patronizing thing can come across, and so trying to have elements of both humor and illustration and other things that make it feel lighter and also make it clear to the reader that I don't take myself that seriously, because we also have a unicorn flying in a fruit rainbow in the book, and like that, I don't take myself so seriously that we can't have that there. And so I think like thinking about how all that presents was important, but I did go through a few different versions of how to voice the book too. So my mom allowed me a lot of latitude in like writing in writing her voice and my voice. And at one point early on, my vision was I was going to be a child, like a very precocious 9-year-old, and my mom was going to be an adult. And it became clear very quickly that like the language I was finding myself wanting to use, the 9-year, like it was too far. And really I was holding on to that 9-year-old thing because of one joke that I wanted to have in the book.
What was the joke?
All right, we're gonna do it. Within Ayurveda, which is the Indian study of like medicine and food, which Ayurvedic medicine, the more I read about it from a historical standpoint, the less faith I have in what's going on there, in that it's very tied up in a lot of problematic bits of Hinduism and patriarchal systems and all of these, like the power structures, basically preserving power structures. That's not to suggest that it's without its value, and it is not what necessarily is clear cut as what you see when you walk into a yoga studio. So there's
Such
one.
a good joke setup.
It's a great joke. So there was one history book where I was reading that basically my mom and I are going back and forth, and I'm a child who's reading, and I'm reading about Ayurveda in front of her, and she asks me, like I ask, like I'm talking about how reading from this book by a historian named Colleen Sen, that within Ayurveda, as all food becomes liquids that are like liquids that are more and more valuable, and so like there's phlegm and blood, and then at the very top, the highest possible thing that Ayurveda, like the food can become in Ayurveda. And I asked my mom, "What's a semen?" At which point she tells me to stop reading. She doesn't want me to read books anymore. The whole section that was going to be Ayurvedic Guide to Spices is just Auyon's Guide to nothing to do with Ayurveda. Which, like, yeah, just that.
That's a big one to build a whole book around.
Yeah. Eventually I came around, and I didn't. The manuscript that I did send to our publisher didn't have semen written once. And so, that was the.
But he'll add the word during the signing.
Yeah, very. But eventually, I grew up as the illustrated me, but yeah, and I think the way that I split the voices between us was a lot of my mom has a lot of family stories and her upbringing in India, and then anything that was more historically oriented, I generally have it in my voice in the book.
Jyoti, you're a teacher and you've taught thousands of students over the years, culinary students in cooking school. I'm always fascinated because I think the best cookbooks tend to be the ones that are written by people who have a strong background in teaching cooking classes, because they really know how to write recipes. But you were just saying that you don't really think of yourself as a writer, right? Auyon is
Not
your
at all.
writer. So what is it like for you to navigate sort of the shift in mode from speaking and moving and demonstrating to translating that into words and making sure that the words capture what it is you're trying to
So
say?
Auyon is very good at capturing my words in a good way, and sometimes not in a good way too. But you know, it was the hardest thing for me was writing recipes because partly because I don't like to measure, and so when you're writing a cookbook, you have to measure, and it is. Auyon was my taskmaster at that time, and I shed so many tears because I would forget, we would be recipe testing and I would forget to measure maybe one ingredient, and he would walk in right when I was forgetting. And it has happened that he made me repeat those recipes all the way from the beginning. And you know, when you're right at the end of a recipe and then your son walks in and catches you not measuring, it is very, 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 very difficult and very frustrating. So, and I did cry a lot because I hated repeating it. So I have to tell you guys that every recipe in this book has been tested 5 times at least. So they are, and we have tried to hold your hand all the way through the recipe, through the cooking process, so that by the time you finish whatever it is that you are making, it will be as close to perfect as it can be. And for me, since Auyon has always been my voice writing, I had no doubt that he would totally capture what I want to say, because he like he said, 10 years before, he's been doing it for about 15 years now, and plus he's been hearing my voice since he was a baby, so he just knows exactly how I would enunciate something or say something or express something. So, and he has captured it very rightly in the book.
And are there any specific quirks or aspects to your mother as a teacher that you feel like you tried to capture in the book?
Yeah, I mean, my mother is an extremely confident woman. And I know now what it feels like to write as a very confident woman. And it's awesome. I can just say stuff, and it's real, it's really good. I'm much less confident as a writer than my mother is as a person. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably changed my personality a little bit, like studying her
This is fascinating
confidence.
and Freudian.
Yeah, I've thought about a lot of stuff in this book, and this is the first time I've thought about that as a possibility. Writing, yeah. Writing as my mom. I am my mom. I'm my mom. Yeah. But both mother and son were harmed in the making of art.
Devin and Sandra, for your book too, guys, this applies to everything. It's so interesting because on the surface, these books could not be more dissimilar. Like, your cocktail book is exuberant and full of jokes and just like the wackiest, most joyful, crazy book. And Harlan Masala is also very much, you know, it has its moments of levity, but it's a serious, amazing cookbook that teaches you an extraordinary amount, both about history and about how to move around in your kitchen. But they're so fun and they're so alive. And I feel like I was going to ask this question just to the two of you, but I think it actually applies across the board. There's such a heart in your book that is about giving permission to just try something, just follow your heart, do something crazy. Like some of the drink recipes are totally bonkers. We were just talking backstage about a martini made with squid ink that is garnished with a curl of octopus tentacle. I mean, like there's a michelada with a blue cheese rim for like a riff on a chicken wing. I mean, it's just absolutely the Easter Island cocktail that I mentioned before is garnished with jelly beans. I mean, they're just bonkers. But they also seem brilliant, and also they make you feel like, wait, like a cocktail can be anything. A cocktail can make me happy. And I'm curious about that idea of like permission and liberation and joy and flexibility that is so inherent in this book. Like, did you bake that in knowingly, or am I just dumping my therapy session on you now?
It's interesting. It was really interesting hearing these two talk about measuring, because there's a very direct parallel. So I measure all my cocktails meticulously, like, you know, to the 1/8 of an ounce. My mom, when she makes cocktails, is just a mad scientist, just throwing everything together. So we're just mirrors. Yeah. But I really like the idea. Like, I think what appeals to me about cocktails and making like kind of goofy cocktails like this is that you have this, you know, rigid structure. You have a kind of a formula, and then within that structure, you just kind of freestyle. So, and I think there's kind of a similarity there with Tartan and Masala as well, where it's like, yeah, it's a proper cookbook. You know, it teaches you all the techniques. You know, it's very kind of lucid in its writing, but there's also this sort of freewheeling. Like, there's like an undercurrent of anarchism to it.
Exactly, anarchism. Well, it's also, I mean, it's a very foundational part of the narrative of Heartland Masala. You know, in the introduction, Jyoti, you talk about, I guess both of you and your mother's voice, talk about, you know, learning to cook Indian food while in America and having to use what's in front of me, the anecdote about finding Brussels sprouts at the grocery store and having to incorporate that into it. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily call that anarchy, but there is something a little inherently anarchic about adaptation and about, you know, migration and reestablishment. Like, yeah, I'd love to hear you speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, so again, me as a confident woman, I wrote in my mother's voice, "Be bold, be creative," which is a catchphrase that she endorses wholeheartedly. And then for my bit of the anarchy, I think it's just the I love that way of describing it as an undercurrent of anarchy is the idea that like there is any one authentic version of food is a tricky thing, but especially so maybe within Indian food, where talking about something as broad as the cooking of India is like talking about something as broad as the cooking of Europe, where like it's very broad. There are many, a great uncle of mine wrote, there are many Indias, there are also many authentic samosa recipes depending on which state you're talking. Like, you can have a samosa slapped out of your hand and called a fraud by someone from a different part of India when that happens. This happens. People will slap things out of your hand. You gotta watch out for that. End that story there. So with our book, but the tricky thing with a cookbook is you also want the recipes to come out well. And if you're too freewheeling about like do whatever you want here, especially with a cuisine that's less familiar to an audience, you have to be pretty precise. So balancing that precision with a lot of encouragement to go out, get wild was an important part of the book for us. And I think my favorite bit, one of my favorite bits to write was our spice glossary, wherein we give bits, this is in the back matter, so after the last recipes, some botanical and historical context for all of the spices, and ways to use all of those ingredients in non-Indian contexts. Because our dream for this book is you'll get a bunch of spices for the purposes of this book or some other Indian book, and then proceed to use those spices in ways that have nothing to do with Indian cooking, just to get like more vocabulary, like to build up your vocabulary, build up your facility, and then like play and keep experimenting, just because that is the way that like, this book is not the last word on Indian food. It's like one snapshot in a vast, constantly moving universe, and that like to sort of both pay like the proper homage to like what our snapshot is, while still recognizing what it is in the bigger context, was an important sort of, I think, line to dance around.
There's a line in the book that really stuck with me that speaks sort of exactly to that, where you say that authenticity is just a snapshot of a place and a time. And you know, the extrapolation from that is, well, it's not the place and time of like me in my apartment right now. Like, that's not the place, that's not the time. So I have to adapt it. I have to expand it or contract it as it might be. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's very beautiful. Very exciting. Are we on time, by the way?
We have time for maybe 5 more minutes questions.
Oh, great. Well, questions then. For all of us to talk. Great. I have so many questions, you guys. I hope you all do too. We're gonna have time for a little bit of audience Q&A at the end of this. Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. Well, okay, let's talk sort of big picture about creativity. You know, all 4 of you do your own things individually, and you do things together. And I'm curious what you learned about each other, both as mother and son, but also as collaborators over the course of doing this process? What was it like opening your individual creativities to each other?
Looks like everybody's looking.
You're at the end of the row, so it's easy for all of us to just turn our heads.
You know, it is as much and as well as I know my son. I actually, when we were collaborating together, I learned so much more about Auyon and how meticulous he is, how precise he is, which I really, and of course he is very funny too, so he did make me laugh too when I used to shed tears because I had to repeat recipes. But my wish for every mother is to be blessed with a son like him. He has just been an amazing partner and an amazing source of strength, and I give him a lot of credit for where the book is today. I know for sure that if I didn't have Auyon by my side, that the book would not have reached the levels that it has today. The way it is being appreciated, the way it has been received, it is just heartwarming, and for me as a mother, it is it's a dream come true. So I'm very blessed, extremely blessed.
Don't know what to say now. Thank you, Ma, for that. Love you too. I think creativity-wise, I have a lot of wacky ideas and like to push boundaries, and I was very impressed with how open to all of that my mom was. Like I got to sort of see my vision through for most of the book, design-wise and illustration-wise and writing-wise. And there were a couple times where she pushed back. Like I gave her sort of, she had oversight over the whole thing, and especially anything in her voice, but also otherwise. And I was very impressed with how willing to be weird she was, because like I think what our book is, it like there's it is our book, but it's also a compliment to these classes my mom teaches, and my mom has a very specific thing she does in her classes, and how like to make a piece of art that complements another form of art is just a different thing. And I think it's very similar to like the difference between a live show and recorded music. There are some bands that will do the exact same thing, and it's just like they go in and cut a live record, and that's a beautiful thing. But other bands like mine, we tend to do like a very produced album, and then our live show is a very different thing. And the hope is that you find something where you build something that has resonance and feels good alongside the other one, but they're not. There's so many different. Like there's no way to like fully capture the experience of a live show on record. The same way that there's no way to fully capture a class on the page. And so the hope was that by like adding some of these things that I was excited about in, that would help to capture some of this quirky quality of my mom's classes that would have been impossible to just like write as a dialogue. And so I was very impressed that she was willing to let me get as weird as I wanted to.
Devin, you, I assume, grew up immersed in your mother's creative practice and drawing and being surrounded by, doodles and critters and rhymes and puns. Did you gain a different perspective on it when you were working with her?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. It's, my parents were very, very laissez-faire, so like when I was in maybe my late teens, or maybe even earlier, they sort of stopped feeling like quite my parents, and they're kind of just my friends. So it wasn't, I think when you're young, you're very much in awe of your parents. They're kind of gods. And then, like later on, they're kind of just my peers. But then working with my mom again, I'm like still very much in awe of her as like a business. She's like this powerhouse, both creatively, and she also like handles, like she doesn't have a lawyer. She writes her own contracts. She's just like a one-woman, juggernaut. And so I was kind of like
so cool.
So I was like kind of intimidated by her all over again. It was like suddenly like I was 5 years old and she was my mom, instead of being kind of just my drinking buddy. I should have been for many years.
That must have did you have to take stock and reassess?
Yeah, I mean, I have collaborated with her creatively, like I'll kind of, but sort of informally, I'll kind of pop my head into her office and she'll be like, oh, is this page working or whatever. So it wasn't totally unfamiliar to work with her in that capacity, but the dynamic was very different once we were like formally working on something together. And yeah, I think I got used to it, but it was still sort of daunting, kind of stepping foot into her world.
Sandy, how about you? Did working with Devin change or open or expand your sense of him?
Everyone's been so articulate here. That's really mean.
I say how blessed you are.
I am so blessed. I am so blessed to have a son like you. And it's not just the cocktails. I mean, our family, you know, there are 4 kids and 2 parents, and we are a creative family for for all the great things about that and all the complicated things about that. And I wouldn't have it any. I mean, we've all worked together. We've done, you know, music together and theater together and just all kinds of. It's a very free form, creative place. You know, our home was. So I don't know. I mean, I never expected to be able to do a book with Devin, and it was really cool. And it was cool because I had to step back and say, oh, I'm the illustrator. And it's much harder to do one than it is to do 2. You know, so when I write and illustrate, I could just change, if it doesn't fit well on the page, I can say, well, wait, I could say it that way and then it'll fit. You know, with Devin, I have the cocktail and the text, I'm not going to change anything. And then if he wanted to change something, because he's more of a perfectionist than I am, he's this incredible perfectionist, I go, okay, that's better what you did. Now I have to redesign that whole thing. But it was interesting, right? To get into that role, because you know the design of a page is communication as well. It's not just the words; it's how does it interact. And you know this well from your time at Workman too. I mean, obviously what we do now, but
Learned a lot.
yeah, and we both learned a lot at Workman. Amazing place. So just being around creative people, there's nothing like that. You know, sort of the hope of the world.
The hope of the world. On the note of the hope of the world, let's turn it over to you guys. What we're gonna do on behalf of the folks who are watching us on the live stream is we'll call on you for questions. I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3, and I'll repeat the questions to the microphone so that folks who are listening at home can hear us. So hands up, y'all. If you don't have questions, I have so many more, and many are about Freud. But okay, right here in the front.
This is a complete dream come true because I've literally been reading Sandra Boynton books for my entire life, and I have, I'd say, at least a dozen of them memorized for my own children. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Auyon Mukharji for about 20 years, and could not have been more of a fangirl about this book 4 years ago, let alone now as it's published. So very excited to be here. I love hearing you all talk about your crossover with music, because I think that's this like lovely undercurrent here that is so powerful for both of you in interesting ways. I like thinking about.
Hand you the microphone.
Okay, cool.
Hi.
I guess I'm standing.
Yeah. I like thinking about, you know, albums and how you were talking about cover design and how that kind of crosses over. I feel like the question that is most pressing music related is, what did you listen to as you were making all of these recipes and cocktails, and will you release a playlist for all of us?
Such a good question. All right. Each duo, take this. What were you listening to while you were testing your books?
Oh man, I don't really listen to music while I work, oddly enough. I don't even listen to music while I run, which I guess makes me a sociopath. The only music was the maraca sound of the cocktail shakers while I was shaking. Trying to think of what I was listening to, like off hours. Lots of The Replacements, I guess. Yeah, I think that was the soundtrack of writing this book.
Do you listen to music while you draw?
No, I've never been able to listen to music when I work. I've never been able to listen to music while I work at all. I mean, as a college student, as a high school student, I can't, because then I just listen to the music and so it's interesting. It's a big dividing line on that. But we did come to Brooklyn to see Nine Inch Nails, though, like what?
Yeah, but the book was finished at that point. So that
You could tell from the book that it was in the future.
yeah.
How about the review?
Unfortunately, also non-musical listening. I think the stuff I was listening to most often. So in writing this book, I was reading a lot about Indian culinary history and context, and reading about dishes in places that I've not gotten to go. So in preparation for that, I've been listening to a lot of Hindi podcasts to learn Hindi a little bit. My favorite is Puliyabazi, which means in a conversation in Hindi that I pronounced like an American idiot. Everybody was laughing at me because I didn't learn to speak Hindi growing up. But, that's probably my favorite one. I was listening to a lot of that. But I'd say like now I understand it at the level of like a 6th grader. I'd speak it like a 1st grader who's missed a lot of school.
That's really impressive.
I'm working through a workbook too, so it's a multi. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Thank you very much.
Like huge round of applause for that.
So I didn't listen to music, but when I do teach my classes, I do play Darling Side. And, especially when we are at the end of the class, we are almost finishing cooking. That is when I start Darling Side, so that while they're all having their dinner, they are listening to Darling Side. And believe it or not, I was the one who was most upset when Auyon went into music, because I was the one who would drive them for their academic stuff and then also to music, and the music teacher would say, well, Auyon needs to practice a little more, and I would tell her, the focus is not music, it is academic. Well, and I met her after that, and she said, well, what happened? So, and I have to say that, you know, before Spotify and Apple Music and all these other things came up, do you know, I'm one of their biggest fans, and I had sold 750 CDs of theirs before all the Spotify stuff came out. I was actually sad that it came out because I wanted to sell more, but you know, people were not listening to CDs in their cars or at home. They were listening to Spotify. So,
She was our most aggressive merch. The few times we toured through Kansas City and she
should run the merch table.
it was incredible to watch. Yeah. Very intimidating.
I think you guys have one more question. Yeah, right here in the front.
I want to say I think it's extremely interesting that it's a mother-son duo. Like coming from the South, it was always very difficult to find times I could spend with my mom and find things that I could do with her where it wasn't, oh, you should be doing things that are more masculine or more out and about playing sports. It was a creative time, and it always ended up somewhere in the kitchen. Or I find during the time from before I went sober, we would always go out for drinks, so we would have that time together. So I think it's interesting that you guys created these books around that, and like me and mother talk about this a lot. Like, what led you specifically to say, you know what, I want to do this with my son? Because it's something that happens, but we don't talk about the fact that it happens. Because outside of that, I can't think of any other time where a mother and son really do get to spend a heavy amount of time working on something together.
True. For me, it was very easy because my students wanted me to write a book. And Auyon was always doing my ghostwriting because I don't like to write. I love to talk. I can sing too. but I don't like to write. So that's how our collaboration came about.
Masculinity has never played a particularly large role in my life. It's something that I would have wanted to change when I was younger, and now I've accepted it, I think. So the idea of hanging out with my mom in the kitchen feels pretty natural.
In my family, we had a somewhat unorthodox kind of gender dynamic where my mom was the main breadwinner and my dad did like the cooking and the laundry for the most part. And so, in kind of other ways, my mom was fairly feminine and my dad is masculine. He's an Olympic athlete, but he was also just like where they weren't kind of tied to those sort of traditional gender roles. And so also my mom was the one who was drinking all the martinis. So when I learned to make cocktails, I was making them for her and not for my dad.
I don't have anything to add.
Alright, well, if we have nothing else to add, I think it's time to go sign some books. All four of you, I think, are going to be back at the.
No, we're gonna.
Where are we going to be doing this?
Yeah, we're gonna do
come
it.
take a
Sorry.
look?
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
say-
everybody.
yeah.
This was amazing.
Let's keep it going. This is such a lovely event. Yeah, that's right. How we're gonna line up for this is a little unusual if you've been to one of our events before. We're gonna ask that you line up in the center aisle coming towards the authors, which is not at all intimidating. It is gonna be so chill and cool.
You hold your flowers in front.
Very slowly. And then if you're with us still on the YouTube live stream, again, please explore the link in the description box below. These are wonderful books and you should definitely buy them. And if you're with us here tonight, we have plenty at the front and we would love to sell them all to you. When you get up, please make sure you have all your belongings with you because we have to pick up these chairs and turn the place back into a bookstore. But other than that, have a wonderful night and thank you so much for coming.
Actually, what?
Recipes. I think your parents made one of the test recipes.
Offices are right by.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just wait. Oh, is that very big? Maybe.
I have in mind, yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. We'll find out.
Oh, I have to stop the live stream.
I think it's divide and conquer.